Chapter 11. Caden. Scott checked his calendar, and he soon realized that Amy had to see her pediatrician today, and there was no way she could miss her appointment, even to go to the beach. "Can you go with me?" he asked. "Gray was supposed to be here today, but as you see he can't. Would you like to take his place?" Of course, I wanted to be with Amy, especially now. I can introduce you to the doctor who will be taking care of Amy, perhaps for the next 20 years. That's a long time, I thought. I'd be about, oh no. I don't want to think about that now. Of course, I want to go. I need to be there to hold her hand. It's important for her to see me, to let her know that everything will be all right, and that I will protect her. I just hoped I could keep it together when she got her first shot. I remembered when I was young and I heard another child scream, and I'd bolted out of the exam room with my mother hot on my heels. Finally, she'd caught up with me and convinced me that I would be all right. Needless to say, I'd created such an uproar with the other children that the physician had to cancel all appointments that day. I focused on what Scott had said and I'd forgotten about Lane. Gray had made plans for us to go together, but since Gray won't be here, it's only fitting that you take his place. You're going to be married to him soon, and it would be a good idea if you're introduced as one of Amy's caregivers. I've called the doctor and got an early appointment before we head out to the beach. That sounds great to me, I responded, reaching for Amy's bags. Then Lane strolled into the room, ready with his beach bags and cooler. I made sandwiches and treats. Then he glanced over at me and Scott with our solemn faces. "What? Someone died?" Lane questioned. "Lane, baby, I forgot that I have an appointment to take Amy to the doctor today," Scott added. I saw the disappointment in Lane's face, but he tried not to show it, because he knew how important Amy's first visit was. "It won't take long, baby, and Caden and I should be able to handle one baby, and we'll meet you at the beach before you have a chance to miss us." "I have to check on Brian anyway," Lane said, recovering from his disappointment. Not because he needs me to, but because he may have hired someone that is taking his attention away from the shop. "I can handle this if you want to go with Lane." "Amy is such a good baby," Scott said, turning to me. "There's no way you're going to the doctor without me. When Gray's not here, I'm the official parent. He would want it that way, and besides, I'm going to be Mr. Caden Meadows very soon, so have some respect for my position," I joked, puffing out my chest. Lane chuckled. "Look at you. You're taking that daddy thing seriously. Are you ready for all those late-night feedings and potty training? It's not like having pets. You can't forget to feed them and let them out in the yard to do their business. I'll have you know that I was up with her when you and the nurse here were sound asleep. A burglar could have entered the house, or an earthquake siren could have gone off, and you and Mr. Nurse wouldn't have heard anything." "I'm going over to check on Brian," Lane said, hoisting the gear for the beach on his shoulder and picking up the cooler. "How long do you think it's going to take for her physical, baby?" Lane asked. "An hour at most," Scott assured him. Lane leaned in and kissed Scott. Soon that would look like me and Gray, with me going off to work and leaving my baby and house husband at home. As my business husband sauntered to the door, he turned and said, "You know one swallow doesn't make a summer. Just because you changed a diaper one time and baby sat a half second doesn't make you equipped for fatherhood or to be a caretaker," he stated in Scott's defense. I smiled at Lane and turned to Scott. "I know it's a hard job. When are you going to give Lane a dog or two to practice with? Because it's going to take a while for him to get the hang of it, too." "I'd start now, Scott, and maybe in 10 or 20 years he may be ready," I teased. Lane raised his middle finger at me on his way out the door. "I still have to monitor Brian's behavior, and he and Scott are enough for me, so there won't be any babies or dogs in my household, at least for now." Climbing into his car, Lane took off in the direction of the beach, and Scott and I gathered up Amy and her bags, secured her in her car seat, and headed for the doctor's clinic. When we entered the office of Dr. Uday and we were shown a room, the pediatrician came in immediately. She had this somber look on her face when she sat at the computer. I had been checking over Amy's records, and finally they came in this morning from the hospital in New York, and just in time. They should have been here, but then that's another story, and we won't talk about what should have been. What's the problem? Scott asked. I hadn't been around Amy and I didn't know the questions I should have asked, so I kept quiet and listened. It appears Amy has low hemoglobin. I glanced over at Scott. What does that mean? I asked. I stood holding Amy, pacing around the small room as Scott sat and answered several questions. Can you get her biological father here, forthwith? Amy will need a blood transfusion, quickly. I'll have a nurse take her and prepare her for the procedure. When the nurse reached for Amy and took her from my arms, Amy's arms were outstretched, begging for me to come with her. I saw her eyes, and she'd been clutching my fingers and hair, and didn't want to release them. She didn't cry, because she was a good baby. A happy baby. Scott had gone outside the room and called Austin, and then I came out and paced the floor, shaking my hands nervously when Scott talked to Gray. When Austin finally strode in, Scott had hung up with Gray. Gray's coming. He'll be here within 2 hours, Scott said breathlessly. Then he turned to Austin, who was trying to stare me down. I called you before I talked to Gray, and you didn't answer. Don't you know when there is a baby involved, you have to answer your calls, Scott barked. And who are you to tell me anything? I'm the baby's nurse, Scott said, walking up to Austin, meeting his eyes. For your information, I got the message and stopped off to give blood. I've been here as quick as humanly possible. That was when the doctor called Austin aside, and by the look on his face, it was as if someone had died. His brow furrowed, and he stared with his mouth ajar. What is it, doctor? Scott asked, standing near Austin. Call Mr. Meadows. He's the lawful parent, because it appears Mr. Austin can't give his blood, because he's not the father. Did you say that Mr. Meadows had type O positive blood? That's what he said, Scott replied. How long did he say it would be before he got here? The doctor asked. 2 hours, Scott said. That should be enough time to test him and do the transfusion. I was relieved to hear this. You can go into the room, Caden, since you're the fiancé. What about me? Austin whined. You're no longer married to Mr. Meadows and you aren't the father, but I'll make a concession this one time until Mr. Meadows comes. Then he has the last word on everything since you handed over your rights to him in the divorce. Someone must have filled the doctor in on what Austin had done in order to get out of paying child support, and since he was thought to be the natural father, Gray had agreed to let Austin see the baby, I suspected. Now there was no reason for Austin to be involved, unless Gray wanted this. Austin hadn't been around to help Gray with Amy since he'd met Zack. Just when I thought Zack would stay in the wings as they said, Zack came from out of nowhere and rushed up to Austin. You are such a great father, and once Amy is okay, then she can stay with us on holidays and summers in our new home. I have Gray to thank for us getting married, and the new house you bought me. I'm sure Zack didn't know the whole truth about Austin, and vice versa. Austin tried to weasel out of everything that had to do with Amy, and now he had to admit something to Zack. I wasn't waiting any longer for Austin to break the news. There will be no summers with Amy because Austin isn't the father, I crowed in a triumphant voice. I wasn't proud of myself for taking my revenge out on Austin, and Zack deserved to know, because he had been a party in Gray's early misery. Zack turned to Austin, a bit confused. I thought you said. I know what I said. Let's go before Grail gets here. I don't want to face him. That might have been a first for Austin. What was he running from? Surely it wasn't responsibilities of any kind, because so far he'd managed to skirt all of them. Child support being one, and spending time with Amy another. When Gray arrived breathless, I met him. You know, I said, meeting him with a warm kiss. Yes, I know. I think I knew all along, but finally it's official, and I don't have to worry about Austin crashing our wedding. When do you want to be married? As soon as possible, I admitted, not wanting to take any chances. I don't want our little girl to have to leave me again. You should have seen her face. She didn't have you, and Scott and I were the only ones she recognized. I placed my head on Grail's shoulder and we walked down the hall to Amy's room, and when she saw Grail, her brilliant blue eyes brightened. Are you sure you're not the father? She sort of looks like you. Blue eyes and all. Gray chuckled. If you feed children long enough, love them, and take care of them, they will begin to look like you. Wait until you've been on daddy duty for as long as I have, then you'll see the change, he joked, holding on to me as we strolled into the room where Amy lay in a small bed and Scott was sitting holding her hand. At that sight, I knew Lane would be in trouble, and there would be a little one soon. I just hoped not too soon because I needed Lane and Scott now, until I got the hang of being a father.